Yeah, we get back into the 60s in 2 days.
right.
It's not snowing in Bethel either.
No.
So let me see. I see we've come online. So good morning. Today is Wednesday, April 21st. It's 9:04 a.m. and this is a meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We have a variety of things to work on today. First thing up is, and just for people watching, first thing we're doing is the committee discussion on forestry, looking ahead to next session. The proposal of amendment related to the rules around lake encroachment spurred by the whole scuttling of the ship Adirondack discussion we had, and then finishing the morning with a discussion of ARPA money, so that the committee can be aware of what the proposals are, and perhaps weigh in on any of those proposals with the Senate Appropriations Committee, as well as the ARPA proposal that relates to some of the spending also includes a proposal to waive or exempt projects from Act 250. So I've asked council to come in and talk to us about that language. So with that, so let's turn to Senator Campion raised a question last week, which I thought was a good one. You know, we had Commissioner Snyder's report. We had a little conversation around it. And we haven't spent much time talking about forestry this session, but in anticipation of being able to swing back around to that and work on it for next session, I thought he had a good idea in terms of having a committee discussion to see where people are at, what their level of interest is. Do they have particular concerns? There's an awful lot of work that we could take on, and I don't know what the rest of the committee is thinking. So with that, maybe there are a few reference documents. You know, when Commissioner Snyder was in, he referenced, and we have on our website, the 2015 and 2016 reports. And then he delivered a new report last week, quote unquote, revisiting forest health and integrity, an update on work accomplished and recommendations for the future. So anyone watching who wants that report as well is on our website. I reread it last night and flagged some things, but I'd like to first turn to the committee, and maybe Senator Campion, since this was really on your mind, how about you kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Bray. Appreciate you giving the committee time on this to sort of see where we're at, whether or not how much of a priority we think this needs to be. You know, I continue to think that we might, and you know, I could be wrong here, but I'm not sure if we are addressing this as the way that we need to be given the crisis that it is. People, you know, we're welcoming and we want people to move to Vermont, but we want to also curb development. There are a lot of things happening right now, or put development, I think, in the right spots where it needs to be. And I do believe we need to look at this like we're looking at every other major issue that this state is trying to address, whether it's, you know, CSOs, in my committee, literacy, other big problems. We have to know where the big problems exist. And for me, I met with some folks on Monday, forestry related people, and one idea that popped up, and maybe it's already on people's minds, is, you know, there are towns that are under greater threats than others as it relates to their land and their forests disappearing. There are certain characteristics that a certain town might have. They might not have a lot of zoning. They might be close to a commutable area. You look in this region, somebody might say, a sand gate, for example. People can get to Albany, New York pretty easily. Not a lot of zoning. People can, you know, you could see certain things happening over the next decade, and all of a sudden people looking around and realizing that what they had has now disappeared. And perhaps this is the way that the commissioner and others are thinking about it. But the way I think about it is, how are we identifying these areas? Are these areas on the commissioners and others' minds? How can we identify the areas that we know now are under the greatest threat of new development? Since, as the commissioner said, that is the biggest threat. And I appreciate the education component in all of this. I really do. But I don't think it's getting us where, as quickly where we need to be. And I could be wrong. I'm not saying we get rid of that piece, but the other thing is, we work a lot to restore or protect agricultural lands through, the Vermont Land Trust and other organizations. Are we doing enough to protect our forests? And as it's become clear over the past 10 years, things are just getting worse and worse and worse. So, so for me, it also warrants the question if these areas are identified towns. I think up where my family, I have family up in Craftsbury. Are these towns that, again, I don't think have a lot of zoning and might be more likely to be developed, how are we getting ready to protect them or help them sort of set land aside? And sometimes that takes money, and that might take money from the state to, in some ways, and this might be a naive idea, but back in the day, you created parks, you bought state and federal governments came in, they bought land, they created our national parks, they created our state parks, they created our local parks. Are we thinking in that way as again, it relates to some of these communities that are most likely going to, their landscape is going to be changing in the next decade. And right now, with all, I know Jamie Fidel wrote to all of us this morning, I haven't looked at it, but with all the land transfers and property transfers that are happening right now, there's reason to be concerned. So
Sure.
Those are some of my thoughts on this.
Okay, well, great. That's helpful. I also saw Jamie Fidel's message and didn't have time to open it and read. But it may be that I think he was saying that the COVID-driven migration to Vermont, may be a foretaste of climate-driven migration to Vermont. So a passing pressure, but maybe it's a heads up that we're less well positioned than we'd like to think.
Yeah.
To handle.
What I would like to see out of all of this personally is that we do come up with a plan that really, again, starts to shift this. This is a big issue. And as I said to the commissioner, I know he doesn't want it part of his legacy that land is just forestry has constantly disappeared during his tenure. I don't want to see it happen, during our committee's work. I think we need to sit up and take notice and really make a change here.
Right. Well, thanks. And to your point about parks, it's interesting. It would be good for us to know how much land we've added. I don't, every once in a while we hear about large, sort of more spectacular projects, but I don't know the rate at which we're still doing park building or wildlife management areas, or even if it's private conservation through the land trust, stuff like that. But 11,000 acres a year on average of lost forest land.
It's a big issue.
Yeah, it's
a huge issue. Huge.
Bigger number than I would have imagined. I don't think most people realize how much. Okay, so I'm just going to go around the room. Senator McDonell, you want to go
on if we look at what we're spending money on, COVID money on for parks, one of the predominant things is upgrading the roads to get people from civilized area into the parks. And the other area we've had a longer record of is doing boat landings to get people out on the waters. And both of those are fine and good economic ideas, but they're not based on conservation and park-like activities. They're more, they're not mining activities, but they're less friendly to the land that's being opened up than wilderness would be. And I'm not making any judgments. I'm just saying that's what we've been doing.
Right. Okay. Senator McCormick. Senator McCormick, I see your hand up, but you're not visible on the.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I want to thank Senator Campion for his comments, and I concur. But the idea of parkland, which is wonderful, I wish we could do more, but the problem is I think the taxpayers can only afford to have so much land off the rolls. And even if they can afford it, I'm not sure they're willing. I think at some point, and then there are only so many wealthy people, wealthy enough to own acreage and not actually use it and to allow the public to use it. I think it still needs to be profitable to keep forest land forested. And that is the trade-off there is logging. And if it's done properly, I think it does preserve. I spend most of my recreational time in the woods on somebody else's timber lot. That's where I ski, and when I used to hunt, that's where I would hunt. That's where I just walk in the woods, is somebody else's timber lot. And my heart has been broken at times seeing a stretch of forest that I love be even heavily logged. But I've also watched those over the years, watched them grow back, only to be logged again, but they will grow back again. So I think one of the things we have to do is cooperate with the logging industry. But the other thing that worries me, because any land that's not developed, then there's that much less land for housing. And the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund, I think, was a stroke of genius, where the two, there is a nexus of the two. It's been around for decades, and every year, Richie will back me up on this, in appropriations, every year you have to fight to keep the conservation part of housing and conservation. People who don't like conservation a whole lot suddenly become bleeding heart liberals, and are all the only time they're worried about housing is then. But the nexus really works. But what the other thing I just wanted to mention, which is not a solution, just a way of elucidating the problem. On VPR a couple of days ago, they were reporting about the migration, the COVID-related migration to Vermont, and how real estate purchases have gone up. And one of the mentions was that it's not simply housing that's being bought, that there is an increase in the acreage that out-of-staters are buying. And one can only surmise that very likely they're buying that acreage with the intention of building on it. And so, and then the last thing is what we are doing right here and now. We're having a meeting on Zoom, and we're working from home. And when Dean Davis said the dilemma of Vermont is that our beauty is a function of our poverty, to a certain extent, that was true. There were limits on people moving here because they felt you couldn't make a living here. And then, of course, you can. Vermonters have been making a living here for centuries, but not necessarily a level of the opulence that people from downstate New York or Connecticut expect and feel entitled to. And now I think it is possible to make an upper middle class income in Vermont. In the woods, you can build, and you don't need to run a power line to your new place. So I think we do have to really work aggressively at limiting the development of our forests, because I think we ain't seen nothing yet.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Senator Weissman.
So there's two issues that I see. And people can disagree with this or agree with this. Long we've controlled development in the state through wastewater and septic. And it plays a huge role in what we do in development. And I'm very heartened to that the federal money coming down for wastewater and upgrading sewage treatment plants may open capacity, because no one will ever agree that we're totally going to stop development. So people have to have a place to go. And if we can make it easier for them to be in town centers, because we've opened up capacity in sewage treatment plants, in a lot of these cases, people will follow the least line of resistance. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, it's imperative that we help towns pick up those sewage treatment plants to, so there isn't as much pressure for people to go to the countryside. A second piece of getting at what Senator McCormick talked about in the land area and relationship to forestry and the relationship of lots being able to pay for itself. If you're a logger and you go out, you have to be able to fill truckloads of logs to make a job profitable, to be able to cut timber. And what's happening within our current use program is people are narrowing down. They're taking 200-acre lots and they're making 450-acre lots, or as long as they can get 27 acres to get a house and have 25 acres still in the program, it's breaking up the land. It's much harder for a logger to come in if he has to deal now with 4 or 5 or 6 landowners to log that piece of land than it was for someone with 200 acres. So this breakup of the forestry to, smaller lots, but big enough so they should be managed in that view, is happening all the time. And this breakup of our countryside makes it harder and harder for anyone to make any money out of forestry.
Right. Yeah, I think, when you're down to 25 acres, I think for some folks, the way they relate to that is more like the way people relate to their yard. And they don't expect to see commercial activity sort of in their yard. And even good logging is, it's definitely commercial activity when you see people with feller bunchers, skidders. I mean, it's not like lawn maintenance crew showing up. Senator McDonell. So thank you.
Senator Westman is correct. The last couple of weeks, I've been talking with a few loggers, and I've asked a couple of folks around the county to talk to loggers, mostly in connection with Rygate. But in many regards, the land use practices that we're talking about are not loggers, the problems that loggers have. The failure, the elimination of large markets for forest products they have no place to sell it. And for those of us of a certain age, we remember logging being involving kids from 10 years old to adults, sometimes 12 or 14 people out on a local project using little tractors to log. And now those jobs are being done by one person. And that one person does everything by himself or herself. And they do it with specialized equipment. The logging that many Vermonters did 50 years ago was with farm tractors that were being used on small projects. And that's not what's going on today. It's a big industrial business and there's no market for it. The Digger article here recently about sales of out-of-state homes, which is the other half of what we're looking at. The top 15 towns listed from Stowe, Ludlow, Dover, Stratton, Woodstock, Killington, Warren, Winhall, Hartford, Dorset, Plymouth, Burlington, and Pomfret. It was Burlington, Hartford were the only two that were towns that were not really resort towns. They were commuter towns to Dartmouth and Burlington. And that's where these out-of-state purchases are taking place. When we're looking at how we deal with land development, we have every time we try and deal with Act 250 to deal with forest breakups, it suddenly becomes a place to stick amendments to do things that are to weaken our review process in the rest of the state. It's a changing landscape right now, and I know I'm blathering on, but I was at a meeting over in Vershire last week and some Saturday morning, and they were talking about affordable housing. If I've already said this, tell me to be quiet. What are we doing about affordable housing in Vermont? Well, on one hand, we have a whole host of Vermonters that can't afford housing because it's too expensive and they don't have the money and the earning power to be able to buy and their own homes. But at the very same time, we have extraordinarily affordable housing, which is being purchased by people who already own 2, 3, maybe 4 houses. And they go, wow, Vermont's housing is really affordable. Let's go buy one of those. So we're looking at what's right in front of us, and we're not. How is it that we have a country where a significant part of our small part of our population and the folks that look at housing as being cheap and plentiful, and the vast majority who can't afford it? And we look at this pandemic and we're looking at how individuals come out of this pandemic, and the same group of people that has 3 or 4 houses seems to be coming out well positioned to buy 1 or 2 more. And the very same people who are struggling worse and are more likely to be losing the houses that they have, or that those houses are being saved on their behalf only by the expenditure of federal funds that we're seeking to direct in a thoughtful way. So we're in the Natural Resources Committee, our decisions are ruled by those economic factors and what's going on in the marketplace. And we are on the defense, on the defense, on the defense, and on the defense. we're not dealing with the underlying concerns that have been going on for 40 years. So that's my little speech. But it's right up with Senator Westman is, and our witnesses have described this to us, what we see in front of us, but not often how it has come to pass. So.
Yeah, I would agree with on the defense. I mean, it's kind of like my take is that on all the work we do in here, everyone says, I'm all for clean air, clean water, all these things. But then as soon as there's an impingement on what we've done in the past that's been damaging, we get pushback. And I understand why people don't want to be changing. Sort of like everyone else other than me should change first. I wanted to double back to Senator Westman and ask about, the fragmentation. If you and Senator McDonald and I, and who knows, over time, maybe everyone on this committee has served on a current use work group at some point. And it makes me wonder about the whole idea of, is that threshold of 25 acres plus, 2 for house for homestead, is that a useful thing anymore for Vermont? Should that threshold be higher? I don't want to take us off on an entire conversation.
To deal with which goal? Housing
Well,
affordability, or to deal with the cost of current use? What?
I think you might end up with the almost the same number of acres in conservation, but you might end up with fewer larger lots.
Fewer owners?
Fewer owners. Now you might say, well, that's just driving costs up. But I don't know that we want to develop 27-acre building lots in the woods everywhere.
Well, I'm not sure that when somebody that owns 200 acres ends up selling and they break it up into lots, I think we'd all rather that they sell it as one piece if they felt they had to sell it and keep it larger. I think that is better. It creates less driveways for runoff. You don't end up with a patchwork of stuff. On the production side, it's easier to maintain, log, and do those traditional uses on it. I don't have any answer for that, but I do know, I think it's a sad state when our old farms are now being broken up into smaller lots.
Yeah. Senator Westman is absolutely correct that that's a problem we're facing. And the tour that was done maybe 4 years ago or whatever that went around the state on current use issues, and those of us that participated in that went out looking to the answers for questions A, B, C, and D. And we came back at the end of that tour, and the thing that we learned that we had never expected to learn when we went on the tour was that A, B, C, and D were not were less important than what we learned. And what we learned was that since the beginning of current use and the encouragement to develop forests and to treat them as resources for the state and to reward landowners for not taking all to getting rid of the junk wood so that the valuable stuff could grow, and building forests that had value. After 40 years of that, the people who owned those forests were dying. They were dropping dead, or they were finished. Their life was at an end. And what happened to those large plots that Senator Westman is points to? Well, they were broken up and given to the heirs in the grandchildren of the children. And the children and the grandchildren may have lived in California, Florida, who knows where. And they wrestled with what we're going to do with these big lots, and more often than we would have hoped, they did what we see happening in agriculture in Iowa and Ohio, is that they were divided up, and each of the children was given X number of acres. The children called loggers and said, what can we do with these? And they said, well, we'll clear cut it for you. And when we're done, we'll write the 10% check right now. We'll clear cut it or harvest everything. And when we're done, this child may have 120 acres, and you can sell that for, you can sell X number of building lots. And you'll get a check for the clear cut, and you'll get a check for the building lot, and you can, upgrade your house in California where you live. And Vermont's countryside will reflect those behaviors. That's the commercial, that's the capitalist system, and that's the system we have. And we spend a lot of money as Vermonters investing in these forests for their future value and for their future economy. And this is what's happening to them. That's what's going on. And sometimes we don't recognize that's what's going on, but it agonizes us and it drives us crazy, and we're wrestling with ways to deal with it.
I might,
And yeah,
I might just add on to that. I think when they break it up, what they're doing now is they sell it 27 acres. And particularly when you're selling it to somebody from down country that comes from a more urban environment, they see, I can get 25 acres around my house, I can build a big house, and I can get a reduced tax rate, and look at what we've done. But it creates a patchwork of our countryside that I think is not good for the countryside. I'm old enough now that we used to have the 10-acre exemption, and it used to be everybody built on 10 acres. Now everybody's building on 27, and I hate that. I would just say too, I'm going to just give you my own personal example. We have a house that went on the backside of the farm, and a few years ago, we had to upgrade the septic system. It's a mound system. It cost us nearly $27,000 to upgrade that mound system. It's a significant cost of development when you have to do a mound system. If you have lots that are closer to villages that are able to avail themselves of a sewage treatment plant, and the hookup cost is under $10,000 versus $27,000, it's going to have an effect on some of the development. And so it's imperative for us to make sure that in our downtowns, that infrastructure is there at a price that people can afford to hook up.
So I would agree with that. I'm just wondering, to what degree do people who are already in town and already paying for sewer bill, to what degree are they willing to take on a bond to expand the capacity or upgrade their wastewater treatment facility or town septic to accommodate more folks? Like, are they going to see growth in the grand list as a net positive, or even growth at all in their village as a positive? And therefore, I don't know if people are willing to think that way. Like, let's have smart growth.
That's where I feel.
So Senator McCormick, then Senator Campion. Sorry.
Thanks. I just want to several people have mentioned, in particular Senator Westman, about the importance of encouraging downtown development or development closer to downtown. And I just want to echo that. I think that's absolutely on the money. I think, and I do want to put in the one proviso that there are many ways we can do that. I would hope we would not look to weakening Act 250 as one of them. I think, in fact, there are ways to make Act 250 more downtown friendly, and we should look at that. But the Act 250 exemption, and I've held for it. You've heard me, so you're probably sick of me on that. But I just want to revisit that I think weakening Act 250 for the purpose of encouraging downtown development is a bad idea. And that doesn't mean I need to be convinced about the importance of encouraging downtown development.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It's like, if there's a problem with Act 250, define the problem, then improve Act 250. Don't just ask to be let out.
It's an excuse
Chair.
for many of the
Yeah.
other problems that are difficult to solve.
Senator Campion.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So back to the point about bonding and what communities need. This is where it's going to take real state resources and to either encourage the bonding, to help them to figure these kinds of things out, for us to give communities the support so that they can make these decisions and I think in the most part, protect the forests in their communities. And it's not unlike maybe other work that we've done around energy planning and things like that.
Right.
But I'm worried. I appreciate the conversation, and I think we're identifying a lot of areas to focus on. But this state is going to look very, very different in 20 years if we don't do something. And I think Senator Westman's right. I mean, it's going to be a lot of parcels of land that are going to have houses on. I mean, it's going to be a continuation of what we're seeing, and we need to really start to focus on this, or we're not going to be able to stop it.
Right.
Or we decide we don't want to stop it. I mean, but that's not where I'm at. I think we need to give local communities decision making, help them with their decision making, give them the resources, give them the planning tools, so that they're not looking around in 20 years and saying, what happened? And it also, we didn't have the money, we didn't have the tools, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, I'm feeling like I would want to bone up on, we've changed municipal planning laws several times in the last few sessions, including things like considering fragmentation and habitat connectors and town forests. But my sense is that, it's been a start, but there's been a certain amount of reluctance on the part of landowners around municipalities to see municipalities becoming more active, because it represents to them a loss of opportunity, I think, to develop, or basically.
Well, here's what I would say to you. I think the paradigm has changed on that. You can sell a large lot to somebody wealthy and not have to, every time we gave a 3-acre lot to my cousin. My cousin came when my father broke his hip and worked on the farm for a year to get my father through a hard time. And my father was able to farm another 3 or 4 years. And we couldn't pay him, so we gave him 3 acres of land. It cost us just to pay the current use penalty, subdivide the land, And we didn't want to hand him a lot that wasn't developable. So we did, dug the test pits and did all the stuff for the septic and got him a septic system that was designed. All of that cost us between 14 and 15,000. So if every single time you break up a lot, you have to subdivide, you have to do all of these things, there's a cost to breaking it up. If you can sell your 200 acres to somebody that wants to buy, in this day and age, you can charge a lot more. It's about what the bottom line is, not about, you know, the potential of this breakup or that breakup or what it is. People that are coming here that Senator McDonell talks about that have 3 and 4 homes want their privacy and they want what they want. And a lot of times they're willing to pay for it. So the paradigm of thinking that just because I can break something up, I can, at the end of the balance sheet, I can make more. I think part of what our question is when someone sells a big lot and they keep it together, how do we make their bottom line make that doable and make it less attractive to maybe break it all up into these pieces?
Right. You know, I don't know if they've gone out of favor, but there was a phase 30 years ago, maybe, planned residential developments, right? Where you would
Yep.
hold some land in common and it would stay a green space. And then the building lots were smaller. So it's like, I don't know why I don't see proposals like that much, but I'm not a developer. So maybe they're still out there, but I'm not that aware of things like that. I know that there's Charlie Hancock, who's going to be coming in to talk to us next week, who's a forester. And I think he's been actively involved in a project up around Montgomery where they're trying to preserve a bigger parcel, like 200 to 400 acres, and then have smaller lots and keep most of it as, intact forest, something like that. So a chance to hear an update on that.
Mr. Chair, those things would make housing more affordable. And when you try and put that into law and push that forward, where's the opposition from? Time and again, where's the opposition from?
For a planned residential development sort of
Yeah,
scheme?
which makes houses more affordable and cost less and makes the land be, in the view of people that own land, less valuable.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to answer the question because I'm going to guess wrong, I can tell.
Well, the big forest tracts owners are the ones that come out immediately and say, no.
Because we're hampering their ability to develop at some point.
Well, they apparently so. That's what I would conclude.
Sarah Campion?
So in all of this, one of the things I'm wondering if it makes sense, I would at least like to leave this session with giving some direction to folks. I mean, I appreciate getting brought up to speed on some of, municipal regulations, et cetera, but I'd like to come back and have something to work from, give some kind of direction to the commissioner and his team that, we're recognizing this. Here are some general, it doesn't have to be in legislation, but give some direction so that there are some opportunities to get going on some of this work so that we're not spending time next year without, with a blank slate.
Right.
I'd rather start with something.
Well, one theme that's come up this morning is make it affordable for forests to remain forests, and some of that means keeping parcels intact, loggable, et cetera. They can return some value. I'd be interested in hearing again from Ellen Kaler, who, when I first connected with her, it was, I've referenced farm to plate, but her work prior to that and is ongoing since then is related to the forest products. Well, not, I don't, I'd have to check. She's been building a new coalition around trying to revitalize the forest and wood products industry. And so that's only part of the answer, but given that this is a capitalist system, right? I mean, we have to, in essence, all these points we've been talking about this money come back down to money one way or another. So on having a healthy forestry and wood products industry, that's one thing that I would be game for learning more about. I'm not saying that's the only thing. Senator Campion.
I mean, I'd like to learn about all of it, but I think if that's the direction we're going to kick this off in, I think we're missing the point that things are at a much more serious state right now. Personally, I just think it's, we know that there are things happening out there around logging and forest management, but I'm talking about, again, just these 11,000 acres disappearing every single year. And what can we start to do to really halt this so that, or put a pause on it, or so.
So, Mr. Chair, both Senator McCormick and Senator Campion have recognized what we need to change to get, but they have both at the same time say, given our limited resources, given our ability of the taxpayers to pay, given this and given that, that if we're going to set a direction and we take off the table the large inequalities in our society that each year become less and less equal, that become more and more disparate, the problem that we're trying to deal with gets worse and worse and worse. And when we every year say, well, there are a lot of things we could do, but given that we can't do X, Y, and Z, given that we can't do those things, well, if you can't do those things, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And if fewer people have more and more assets, and we make it more affordable for them to keep the land undeveloped, we've now increased the price of land when it is eventually developed. Or we have to start off and when you have more and more people own a lot of land and fewer people in cities, you are looking at a landscape that was the landscape of the Middle Ages. So what do we? So that's our dilemma. So sorry to harp on that again, but
yeah,
we tie our hands behind the back and say, now that our hands are tied behind the back, let's think up a solution that can resolve this problem. I'm done.
McCormick.
Thanks. I'm getting more and more evidence that I'm not as articulate as I like to think I am. When I mentioned the problems, with the ideas I was putting forward, that was not to say we can't do it. It was to say, if we want to do this, this is one of the problems we're going to have to get over, get under, get around, or get through, or make go away. It's something we have to deal with. I'm identifying the impediments.
Okay.
That's all.
Well, I have a page and a half of notes with a lot of interesting stuff, and what I'm seeing that we're approaching the end of an hour, and it's great that that people obviously have been giving this a lot of thought. And I am having a little trouble seeing, well, there's not the answer, right? It's going to take multiple efforts to change the tide. And what I'm having a little trouble for myself, and that's fine at this point, especially on a first big conversation, is like, okay, so given all that, anything else? And then how do we prioritize amongst those things? I'm guessing that we need to be doing more than one thing. This is not a silver bullet. This is a silver buckshot kind of a thing. Senator Campion?
I think we raise these, our concerns, our questions with people like Michael Snyder, with Jamie Fidel, with others, and ask them to help direct us. These are our concerns. These are our questions, and this, that might be a start.
Okay.
And we also have a big handicap, Mr. Chair. We've got a whole huge amount of money sitting on the table that we're deciding how to use. And that money, in the minds of many people, is an opportunity to put off the long-term decisions and to use some of those monies in this area. That they can either be used to deal with the problem, or they can be used to kind of postpone it. And that makes it much more complicated. It makes it it makes it three-dimensional chess trying to work this out instead of just taxes and spending. It's taxes and spending, and what do you do with the free money? It just makes it more. It's a great opportunity, and it's very troublesome on how to use it wisely.
Yeah, and one thing we haven't talked about, and there is money for this being proposed, it's money related to outdoor recreation. So to what degree does developing the trail networks in Vermont create revenues that help that land stay quote unquote undeveloped? I mean, it's developed some by having trails through it. It's developed some by having people biking through it, but is that a significant improvement over other development? I'm not sure how. I know I encounter people who tell me they think bike paths are a very poor way to develop our forests. So there's a lot of ways of looking at it. So I'll reach out to any other suggestions. Jamie Fidel, I've been corresponding with off and on in the last 5 days since we started talking about forestry again. Commissioner Snyder certainly knows a lot about it. I mean, we just got a 14-page report that probably has 40 action items in it, but they're not necessarily prioritized. So I don't think we're going to do 40 things. So I'm swimming around a little bit here because I'm trying to figure out the best way out of a pathway forward. I shouldn't say best way out of it. A pathway forward that starts to make more progress and slows down forest land loss. So Mr. Fidel, Commissioner Snyder, I'd still be interested in hearing from people who are doing like the working lands forestry initiatives. That's another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, so would I. I just think I'm not quite sure where it fits into and maybe this is probably just my ignorance. I would start with personally Mr. Fidel. He's a voice we haven't really heard recently on this issue, and maybe he can give us some direction also on other people we can hear from.
Right. Okay, well, I'm going to, Senator McCormick.
Thanks. I would include in the mix something like the Appalachian Club or the Green Mountain Club as well.
Okay, so. you have to think some more, on the whole planning and sort of smart growth piece that takes pressure off of development and brings people into towns. That would also be, to me, that's part of what we're talking about. I'm not sure who the right spokesman is for that these days, but
Yeah.
okay. All right. So Commissioner Snyder, Jamie Fidel, Green Mountain Club, Appalachian Club, one or both.
I mean, we're looking for solutions to the problem. I mean, again, I would start with, a new voice. I would start with Fidel, online or offline, saying, here's what we're trying to do. I mean, I appreciate hearing from the clubs and everyone, but yeah, as long as it's teed up that this is what we're not looking for an update on what you're up to. This is the problem we're facing. And we could go down a long rabbit hole and all sorts of conversations.
I get it.
Not that this committee has ever done that.
No. That's the purview of education.
Right.
We're action focused here. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Senator McCormick.
Yeah, to answer Senator Campion, I'm not suggesting that we make the preservationist organizations the whole inquiry, just that their perspective be included.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I agree.
All right.
What was
Well,
the comment at the beginning of this discussion that the poverty or something is what made Vermont beautiful
Yeah.
and attractive?
Dean Davis, the dilemma or the tragedy. I'm doing it from memory. I think it was the tragedy of Vermont, but the dilemma of Vermont is that our beauty is a function of our poverty. Yep.
So, that reminds me of a story my mom shared with me. So she grew up in Brattleboro, had traveled not all around Vermont until going to UVM. So 1942-ish, I think it is, maybe 43. Anyway, she and her mother drove from Brattleboro to Burlington, all, back roads then. And she said that by the time they got to Burlington, she had never realized, she said, I never realized what a poor state I'd grown up in until I made the trip from one corner of the state to the other. She said, you go through towns and there were people living in shacks and they were cobbled together with different bits of lumber. And, it was, she felt like it was, anyway, there is some harsh truth to Dean Davis's observation, I think. Okay, so thank you, everyone. We'll pick this up again next week, get some fresh voices in the room, and look at options for making a difference. And I appreciate the urgency that people are bringing forward, and I think it's absolutely true.
So, Senator Bray.
Yes, please.
Most of the reports that everybody is giving us is they're really good, but they're all got hindsight to them. In the last year, I think we all feel like, and we all understand from a broad sense, that property has been transferring quicker than it had in the past. The tax department, property tax, and the property division in the tax department must have some breakdown through the property transfer tax, through current use, through its numerous touch information about what that looks like. How much of it really is, and what has sped up and what is out of the normal in this. I wonder what insight they have.
Okay. I'll reach out to Commissioner Bolio and see what they can help us with.
Yep.
I think it's a good idea. Okay. While we're sort of in brainstorming mode, anything else anyone wants to put on the table related to forestry or witnesses for more discussions on forestry? Okay. And any other, we have a little, we're going to have a break. Before we do that, any other new business? You know, this is the time of year where things are sort of flying around. It's a little harder to keep track of all the pieces. I know I got an inquiry last week from the House about S124, Senator McCormick, the bill you reported out, the housekeeping bill. I think it went to Energy and Technology. I don't know if they've asked you to come in or they're just taking it up. I do hope that they're going to go ahead and act on it this year.
I have not been asked.
Okay.
They would have asked, I think, through you anyway, wouldn't they?
Sometimes, you know, either way, and maybe the short answer I sent back sufficed or something. So I have not heard anything more. Okay.
I have to review my notes.
H108. So we have work to do on 108 based on testimony yesterday. Although I think we were pretty much all set, other than a further proposal of amendment came from Mr. Groveman. So I'd want to circulate that to the committee. Let me make sure we do that. As I mentioned, we're having Ms. Chakowski in an hour plus, because there's another proposal to change Act 250 as part of the ARPA spend from the governor's office. Senator McDonald and I have been having a conversation offline trying to tee up another bit of energy work, and that is we had Olivia Campbell Anderson was in talking about how do you keep the sun shining at night, the idea of pairing storage with renewable generation. And that also coincided with a conversation where people have been looking at the standard offer was capped in terms of the number of megawatt hours generated capacity. Sorry, megawatts, 127.5. I think that'll all be subscribed or bid out in another year and a half, something like that. So we were thinking about how might standard offer continue, but the newest component be focused on renewable generation plus storage as basically piloting that concept, which seems to be in relatively early stages. So unfortunately, all the witnesses that we wanted to call are away this week. So I think we'll try to get to that at the beginning of next week. Another thing that's come to my attention, maybe you all have heard about it too, is there's some concern from the composting community about the universal recycling law 10 years in terms of how it's approaching food residuals. And I guess the short way of saying it is that the direction we seem to be going is to use mechanical depackaging equipment and to basically rip open packages and get the food out. The concern of composters is that when you do that, you end up with plastic and other contaminants in the food residuals. So their concern is they are losing access to a clean food supply, and it's being replaced with a contaminated supply of food residuals, and then limiting their ability to do truly organic, healthy composting, because you end up with microplastics in your compost. So wanted to have to learn more about that one. Because we're right at a turning point now where there was a grant, and I think a depackaging facility has been set up in Williston. I think there's another one in development, and there's concern that we're making investments that are just going to drive us this direction without consideration of what are we doing to, I'd say, a more organic approach to composting. I think some people think we may be precluding developing the compost industry that we thought we were developing. So that's another one that's sort of in the wings. We have an amendment to look at on the Adirondack. Maybe we're going to be done with that today. Senator Benning is holding the capital bill. If we nail this down this morning, as I hope we do, then I would bring that amendment to institutions and they would add it to the capital bill. So it'll just be become part and parcel of their own proposal, which will mean we won't have to explain it 3 times over as it goes from committee to committee to committee into the floor. Not that we're averse to explaining, but it'd be better to have the committee of origin build it into their own work. So those are just a few of the things that are out there. And if you hear about more things that you want to bring up, let me know. Another thing that's landed on my desk lately, sorry to keep rattling on, but a lot of things are showing up. It's a sure sign of adjournment coming. I have a concern, and I think some others do, that, we've heard about the swap out on money, ARPA money being swapped into for the Clean Water Fund. So basically, instead of using rooms and meals tax, you would release that money to the general fund, and then ARPA money would backfill for the Clean Water Fund. And I completely understand why we're having that conversation. The only thing that I'm not concerned about the dollars so much themselves as that we struggled for many years to get steady funding for clean water. We finally got it. Now we're only 2 years into that, and we're notwithstanding it for 5 years. The ARPA money is for 3.5 years. So there's a timing issue there I don't fully understand how the money swapping will address the 2 different durations, 3.5 versus 5 years. And if we do this, I'm thinking aloud with you about, is there a way for us to get language that would reinstate proactively that rooms and meals revenue stream, as opposed to just hoping that the legislature 5 or 6 years hence says, that's what we were going to do with it, and we're going to restore it now. So I'm just trying to be cautious. Having seen how hard it was to get once, I'd like the default to be that it goes back to that, and that we can explicitly state that, as opposed to just keep our fingers crossed that that's what happens in 2026 or whatever it is.
Well, they're not changing the statute.
Right. It's just a notwithstanding, correct?
Yeah. Look at him laugh.
I'm thinking of we get rid of slavery, we get Jim Crow, and now we have policing, and each time we thought we solved it.
Yeah, I never appreciated the word notwithstanding until I got to the legislature. It's a very exciting word. You can get a lot done with one. Senator McCormick.
Yeah, thanks. Just briefly, since I serve on both this committee and institutions, my sense is that the 2 committees are comfortable with one another's positions at this point. And that this will be, we haven't taken a vote, but I think it'll be in the bill, which just makes it. The other thing I want to mention, and this is not to say that something is a bad idea, just that if it's a good idea and if we're going to do it, here's a potential problem we have to deal with. It raises a problem. Good ideas often create problems. the idea of making the sun shine at night and improved energy storage, that expedites living off grid, which is a good thing. We all love living off grid. We all love the idea of clean green energy such as solar. The downside of this is it expedites invading areas that otherwise would not be developable. Not because of laws or regulations, they would not be developable because it's too expensive to run the power lines. And now you don't need the power lines. So, and that,
The
Senator McDonell.
making the sun shine at night through standard offer would be to put out the package, and it would only apply to places where electricity is delivered.
Yeah. But the technology, which is generally a good technology, does create a problem.
Oh, they all do. I mean, every time you change something, you
Right,
create a different problem. Yeah.
I'm pointing out a particular problem that this particular technology causes. You're very quarrelsome this morning, Mark.
No, we often try to find solutions so that we can go out and say that we've solved them, at the same time that some of the solutions cause other problems that we say we'll deal with those later. I was laughing at the packaging for the compost is put in packages and sent to composting processing facilities. Just like milk used to be in milk cans and put on trucks to go to milk processing facilities. And we mandated that was wasteful, not as clean, and not efficient. So farmers had to decide whether to get bulk tanks and not use the milk cans, and a lot of them went out of business. It's the same challenge for how do we deliver food waste to the facilities in a better way, without hamstringing people. So that the problems don't change. Our willingness to only look at part of the problem to get a quick political solution now at the expense of tougher problems in the future is without limit. We're able to do that over and over again.
Yeah, my metaphor for legislating is Curly Howard trying to get unstuck from flypaper.
Well, that's the perfect place for us to pause. So let's take a break and we'll reconvene at 10:30 on